Wontons are synonymous with Hong Kong food. Wonton noodles even more so. Now, unbeknown to me, I only found this out literally 2 or 3 years ago, that my dad actually worked in a wonton noodle shop in Shuttlecock, which was next to his village in Tam Shu Hang in Hong Kong, when he was a young boy. So that would have been my dad's actually first job outside of the family. And today I'm going to show you how to make the juiciest wontons. We start off with king prawns. Now these are supermarket bought king prawns. They're, you know, I've not deveined them. I'm going to chop them up, so we don't need to do that. But what we do need to do, we need to sort of like do a little bit of pre-prep first. When we eat a wonton, we want to make sure it's nice and sticky and springy and juicy and crispy. Now we do that by changing the pH balance in the king prawns, and that's easily done actually. All we're going to use is a little bit of baking powder, and we add in roughly just under half a teaspoon of baking powder to the king prawns. To this, I'm going to add just a little bit of salt. I'm going to add some of the rock salt that I've got in here. So let me just add a bit of seasoning. And it's really important now that we add really cold iced water. And I'm just going to move that around ever so slightly. And we'll leave these now for roughly 15 minutes. Like I said, what the baking powder does, it changes the pH balance. It draws out some of that moisture that's in those king prawns, and the salt's going to help with that as well, making the king prawns really juicy, crispy. And then I'm going to show you a really lovely technique that we can make sure that they're really springy. So as we eat that wonton, it springs back a little bit in the mouth. I've drained my king prawns. They had about 15 minutes or so. What I've got to do now, I've got to make sure that these are really dry before I start doing anything else. So just get rid of the ice cubes. So I'm just going to place my king prawns onto a clean, dry tea towel, and then I'm going to pat them dry. Just using another tea towel, I'm going to get these really dry. Lovely. All right then. Now we'll just empty these onto my chopping board. And there we have it, a lovely pile of king prawns. The next thing I need to do now is I'm going to separate half of these king prawns and just chop them into quite chunky pieces. The other half I'll mince. So that's roughly half. So with this half, I'm just going to chop into quite chunky pieces, which is going to give those wontons a lovely texture. Now, when we're eating these, we want obviously that springy king prawn juicy taste, but with the crunch and crispiness of the prawn itself. Now, I've not measured out the quantity of prawns that I'm using. I've only actually got 1 packet of wonton wrappers. Now, of course, you can make your own, but I haven't. I've just bought some store-bought. But what I will do as well, I'll wrap some of these in rice paper, and that means Joe can enjoy them as well. Now, you're probably asking yourself, could he do this in a food mixer? Well, the answer is yes and no. Now, with a food mixer or a food blender even, it will chop the king prawns really quite down, and you'll get quite a fine mince, more of a mush. Now, hand cut chopped king prawn wontons, I personally think are the best. Now, I cooked this dish for my parents a few weeks ago actually, and you know, without blowing my own trumpet, they said it was the best king prawns they've ever had. I'm just hoping that when you give these a go, you're going to think exactly the same way. Right, so there's half of my king prawns in a rough dice. So I'll get that underneath this camera here, and you can see that just in there. So that's like a rough dice of king prawn. Now with the other half, I'm going to mince these quite fine. So again, just using my chopper, just roughly, first of all, we just start chopping these up. Just gathering them into the middle. And then I just gather them all back into the centre and I start to run my chopper through the king prawns. That should be plenty. So I'm going to pop this into my bowl over the side here. Give my chopping board a quick wipe down and we can look at the seasoning. So there's my chopped king prawns. So I'll have some of the fine mince just on this side and the more chunkier stuff on this side. Now to season. So first things first, I'm going to get the dries in. So I'm going to get my spoon and I'm going to add roughly a teaspoon of salt, or maybe just under. Now, the reason my salt is pink is because it's pink Himalayan salt. Of course, you can just use your normal salt. So in that goes, maybe not all of that. Then I'm going to add my chicken powder. I do use the chicken powder quite a lot in my cooking. So there's roughly a teaspoon of chicken powder going into the king prawns. And it's at this point, which is really, really important, that when we start mixing the king prawns, we don't just mush it all together. We choose a direction, whether that being clockwise or anti-clockwise, and we keep on stirring in that direction. What that does, it aligns the proteins so the king prawns become more sticky and springy. So just in one direction only, I'm going to start mixing my king prawns in a clockwise motion. And as I continue doing this, you'll see that it gets stickier and stickier. But now that the salt and the chicken powder has combined into the prawns, I'm going to add just a little bit of sugar. That background sweetness is really nice, and the king prawns are naturally sweet anyway. So in goes a teaspoon of sugar. And again, clockwise motion only. I'm going to combine that sugar with the other ingredients. Now at this point, you'd add a rice wine, which I can't use because it has wheat in it. So I'm just going to add a little tiny touch of sweet dry sherry, or sweet sherry is it? Cream sherry. I'll only add a couple of teaspoons. But of course, if you don't drink alcohol, or for religious purposes, you can't use alcohol, just leave it out, it's fine. To seal in all of that flavour, and again to make it even more sticky, I'm going to add some corn flour. So that's about I'm going to add about 3 teaspoons of corn flour because there's quite a lot of king prawns in here. And I'm just going to give my king prawns a final stir. Straight down the sides, get all those king prawns together. And I'm just going to get a bit of cling film. And I'm just going to cover these and then pop them in the fridge for about half an hour to an hour. And then we can make our wontons. I did actually forget to add the oil. So yeah, so they're my prawns. I'm going to add just a little bit of oil. And just for the seasoning, I'm going to add a little bit of sesame oil as well. And I'm just going to mix this in, exactly what I did earlier, just in the same direction. And you can see how firm those king prawns have got now, and that mixture. Here are my wonton wrappers. A teaspoon size piece of the filling. And literally you just gather the 4 corners together in the middle, and then we squeeze a little shuttlecock shape wonton. Dead simple. And the last one. and there's no need to worry. I'm not going to waste the rest of this filling because I'm going to make some rice paper wontons now for Joe. There we have it, a plate full of lovely king prawn wontons. I'm just going to cling film wrap these now, pop them in the fridge. 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now what I'm going to do, guys, with the rest of my wontons, obviously I'm keeping them covered up. They will sit in the fridge for about 3 or 4 days, or you can just pop them into a bag separate. Don't let them sit together, they've got to be separated. Freeze them. Yeah, you see how they're floating now, and they've been floating for roughly a minute, maybe 90 seconds. They're cooked, so we'll just drain those off and just pour those into that bowl there.